Welcome to the Hardcore Casual Gamer. I'm your host, Josh Currier, and with me today is Demarc.
Hey, guys.
Hey, and we have two very special guests from Discord Games. We have James Petruzzi.
Hello.
And we have Tim Dodd.
Hey.
And do you still want Dude? Because I can add that in right now.
Sure.
Tim Dude.
Yeah.
Well, these guys have agreed to let us interview them, so we had a couple of questions to nail them to the wall. I mean, ask them really nice, sweet things. So, Demarc, why don't you go ahead and start off with it?
All right, so I'm always curious about kind of the origins of game developers, so I kind of want to know what was like your first introduction to games and what really kind of got you started into that world?
I think Tim was actually my introduction to even realizing it was possible to make games, and he was doing that stuff. When did you start, Tim? Back in like high school?
Yeah, I started really making games in high school, but from what I recall, the game that really got me inspired to try to make a game was Myst. And I was determined to make Myst. Like, I had no idea how games worked or how they were developed, but I knew, and this was before the internet, so I had Paint and I had the wave recorder, and I recorded sounds and made, like scenery and stuff like that. I didn't make a game, but
you made MS Paint doodles with wave files.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
how did you do Wind? Was it the cardboard paper tube and a wax paper?
Basically, yeah. Just making sounds into, like
that's
clinking
amazing.
things together, like so. But yeah, the game you're talking about, James, was like kind of like a Final Fantasy like 3-ish game. I mean, it never got finished, and it was only like a piece of the game, but
But it was actually my introduction to Tim, because we had a mutual friend, and he was like, "You got to meet this guy, Tim. You guys would be best friends." So he takes me over to Tim's house, and there he is on his computer, and he's just like working on the game. I think he was like working on some battle scene, and he showed us stuff, and I was just like completely blown away that you could even do something like that, because this was way before even indie games were a concept. Like
And I think this was back in your high school era.
Yeah, so this is probably
this is like 1990.
Yeah, 99.
It's probably like 97 or something.
Yeah, because I was a freshman in like 98, so it was definitely right around at the end there. So, but you were doing that in Visual Basic, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it wasn't like RPG Maker. We're talking even before that.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Well, even before that, I mean, gaming is kind of a very niche thing to go into. What kind of gaming background did you guys have that said, this is what I want to do? I want to make these.
I never really thought it was like when I was a kid. Like, I loved games, but I never really considered it even like a possibility that I could make them. Like, just seemed like something that fell from the sky from the gods, and like, us mere mortals could then play them. Like
a god
I was
named
never
Tim.
like, I want to grow up and be a game maker. Like that never like really.
It just seemed like too big. Like he was saying, like I'd mess with games, but I'd mess with like little sections of a game, and it just seemed at that time it seemed so big that you couldn't even do it, right? Like we kind of fell into it later in life. I mean, we always liked games and we always wanted to make games, but we really didn't pursue it until later. You know what I mean? Like, because it just seemed like you'd have to go to college for gaming, like creating a game, and you'd have to know all these people, so.
Yeah, there's no, I mean, it's still, I think today, like, people have it way easier starting out because there's, like, game jams, like, where people can focus on, like, making these small things with a team over just a couple days and kind of learn the basics. And there's, like, so many guides out there now, like, oh, just download this framework and do this stuff, and then you can, like, make a game.
Sure.
And you've got Flappy Bird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we didn't really start actually making stuff together until way after high school. Like, he graduated and went into the Navy, and then I graduated and kind of went to college for a couple years, and then I was working at a help desk, and I had seen something. I can't remember where I saw it now. Some website or something was talking about Torque 2D, and it was like, the only reason I was so excited about it was because I had switched to Mac, and like the thing ran on Windows and Mac, and I was just like, oh my god, I can make games on my Mac. Like, this is the most.
There's something for the Mac.
Yeah, there's something.
That's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I had originally got the Mac for audio production, and then I kind of fell out of that because I was making music with our musician now, Jimmy. So I started, like, we made an album together, and then I kind of realized, like, you know, it wasn't my thing for real. So I started, like, thinking this game thing could be something, you know. Like, I've always been one of those people that have to be doing something, but kind of started making the transition over to this and, like, spending all my free time, like, working on it. And then I just hit all these roadblocks because I didn't really know programming that well. And, you know, I just, like, I was always looking for advice. So, you know, Tim had just got, like, the internet back in the military and all this stuff, and we ended up, like, reconnecting over it, and I was like, hey, you wanna like mess around with this and like make something? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So
Wait,
that's kind of where
internet,
it started.
The military took his internet away?
Well, I think basically, I mean, you don't really, when you're like, I was in the Navy, so you're on a ship.
Got it. Okay,
know?
So you were away in the military. Okay,
yeah,
that makes more sense now.
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah,
kind of
but,
programming were you
down
getting
to
into before games?
right.
Finally got the internet.
Yeah, I have the internet. What is this? But you also got to think, I mean, when me and James were thinking about, hey, we can really make games now, was about around the time when, like, mods were big, you know, and people were making money making mods for Steam, or for Valve, basically, you know, all these Half-Life mods. So there was people, like me and him, like, actually starting, you know, little teams making games, and it was possible. We're like, hey, wait a minute, I mean, maybe we can mess around with this and make a game and be able to do it for a living.
Man, I completely forgot we were like messing around with that Half-Life mod. I completely forgot about that. I guess really that was the kind of start of us working together on stuff.
Well, that was kind of the start of all the big indie scene too, if you think about it. I mean, like, was mods was like the first indie scene, and then after mods came like Braid, and you know, and now it's just getting huge.
Yeah, now it's like its own genre, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, basically is. I mean, like, anybody now, they can really, you know, if they really want to, can go out and make a game.
Yeah. There's Gary's mod. I mean, that still has the title mod in the name, huge. But it's its own thing. It's a beast. It's crazy.
And it's still huge.
Yeah.
It's no Rust, which is the game they did afterwards.
True.
Size-wise, yeah. So, you got another question for him, Demarc?
So that kind of explains kind of what your guys' first foray into development was, but what was really kind of the thing that made you think, this is something that I want to be a part of?
Well, I think really it was when, the thing that like really pushed us was when the XBLIG came out, and like we realized, because we were still messing with Torque 2D, and like we had a pretty good concept for a game. It was like a, this is going to sound so cliche saying this now, but it was like an overhead zombie shooter. Right.
Oh, nice.
It hurts me to just even say it, 'cause there's like so
I've
many
never
out
heard
there.
of one of those. You should run with it.
Yeah. I could dig up some screenshots though, but yeah, we were we were doing that like way before that was even a thing. We're so hipster, but because I always wanted to make Smash TV, like that was my thing. I was like,
oh nice.
Like,
I love Smash
I've always
TV.
been a huge zombie fan, and I was a big Smash TV fan, so I was like, okay, let's just combine the two. You're trapped in a room, and zombies just spawn endlessly. But anyway, so eventually, I think it was like 2007, we saw that Microsoft was starting the Xbox Live indie game thing, and that like we could get a game on the 360, and like that was just like mind blowing. And I think that like became the point like where we started taking it like maybe a little bit more seriously, I guess, and kind of try to step it
was
up
like
a
the
bit.
turning point. And they also had the contest, right? And we wanted
Yeah,
to
the
win
Dream
that.
Build Play contest. Like we submitted. God, thinking back though, like the first game we submitted was 36 Chambers in 2010, and then after we finished that, we started working on Take Arms, and we were kind of hoping that we'd place in Dream Build Play 2011 with that and get onto the Xbox Live Arcade, which didn't end up happening. So
what turned 36 into 48?
So that didn't happen until after Take Arms was out.
Okay.
Like we never actually released the game. Like I submitted it, and they're like there was all these bugs and stuff, and we just started working on Take Arms, and I was like, whatever. Like nobody's gonna really care about that game anyway, so I just kind of forgot about it. And then after Take Arms came out, like we were both so burned out from like the crunch, and like because we were both working full-time jobs and coming home and doing like another 6 to 8 hours a night, you know, on that thing, trying to finish it in time for the indie game Summer Uprising. So it was like 6 months later from that, after release, And I was just like browsing through my hard drive, and I found the files for it and played it a little bit. And I was like, "Hey, this is actually kind of fun." So I just figured I'd at least like finish it and get it out there because it was like pretty much a done game. It's like, and it stood up pretty well. Like I still feel like the mechanics are really solid. Like I'm really proud of the design I did on it. Like I think it's pretty much as simple as you can get with still being challenging.
So that's one
so yeah,
that
I just kind of added
did?
some more. Tim helped me with the engine and stuff.
Okay.
Originally with it, but yeah, when I found the files, I just decided to kind of get the art updated a little bit. So I worked with the artist we had on Take Arms. He did some graphics updates. I added like the 12 extra levels to it, and added like a leaderboard and some other small stuff, and just kind of pushed it out just to get something out there because like it kind of really got me back into the groove and remembering why like I wanted to do this stuff in the first place because. Like after I started playing with it, I remembered like, oh, this is fun. Like,
games
forget
can
all
be
the other
fun.
shit. Like, yeah, like this is actually something like I'm enjoying doing. So that kind of pulled me back out of retirement, so to speak. And I don't think at that point Tim still wasn't really convinced. He was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, if
There is a fine line between games as play and games as work.
Yeah, and it can very quickly cross that line.
Yeah.
It's the divide between fun and work can be kind of blurry sometimes, and I kind of feel like Chasm's a lot of work sometimes and not much fun. But it's always fun to start things, and then it's like once you get like really far into it, and then it kind of becomes like a
task
content grind. Yeah, like
it's the last yard that always gets you.
Yeah, and you're just like kind of looking at a list and trying to work through it rather than just like experimenting and having fun and enjoying yourself, But I think that's the price of making something this large,
Yeah, well, let me ask for you guys before we get into Chasm. Your guys' Take Arms and 48 Chambers probably wasn't quite the success you wanted, but you guys were certainly proud that you got done. I read in a previous interview that you guys weren't too happy with how Greenlight was. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've never really thought it's a bad idea. Like, I've always kind of liked it. The only thing that was really frustrating for us was that they don't make any exceptions. And, like, we were doing, like, the Kickstarter, right? And, like, we thought it would be a huge boost to the Kickstarter to be able to promise people Steam keys. But you're kind of, like, locked into their process, like, where, oh, well, just wait till the next community vote or whatever. And, like, the way that the Kickstarter was laid out was that there was another community, or it's not a vote, really, I should say, like, whatever their picks were, right?
Sure.
Which was really vague. Like, it was really vague in the beginning, like, exactly what was getting pushed through, because they were only doing, like, 10 titles a month instead of the 100 they eventually decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we were, like, halfway through the Kickstarter, and then, like, the next Greenlight selection came out. We weren't in it. We were just like, man, because, I talked to Valve at GDC, and they were like, oh, yeah, just, hit me up, whatever, and just, like, nothing ever came through with it at all. And it was just really frustrating, like, having all these people that, like, wanted the keys, and, like, we thought we were pretty close to getting greenlit, because we were in the top 100 at that time, from what I remember, and it was just, like, it didn't happen, and we were just like, damn, like, you can't make one exception, but, that's how it always is. Like, if you make exception for one person, I guess you gotta do it for everybody, but...
Right.
But, yeah, I don't know. Like, Greenlight is definitely its own whole, issue as far as what's going to be happening or what is and will be happening to the Steam store.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Tim? You've been a little quiet here.
No, I mean, James, he basically went through all that. I mean, he was kind of the handler for Steam and for the Kickstarter. I mean, in the backseat, I could say a lot of things, but I mean, he's mainly been dealing with that,
Sure.
So I don't have
Tim
much
actually
to say
didn't
about
jump back onto the project until after the Kickstarter.
Yep.
Like, I basically developed the prototype and took it to GDC and did the Kickstarter, and when I was doing the budget for it, I was like, dude, if we can raise an extra, whatever K, will you quit your job and work on it full time? And that's basically how I finally got him back into it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Was to convince him that way. So he really didn't, like, get back into everything until last May. So
okay. Well, we should say, and for anyone who doesn't know, you guys had a very successful Kickstarter for Chasm. So that was great to hear. I know Demarc here has been doing nothing but ranting and raving about how great that game looked. So that was definitely one of the reasons we want to get you guys on, so Demarc can just be happy.
We're glad to make
appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're not worthy.
So, do you have a question? You guys want to start talking about Chasm? Demarc, did you want to give him a question?
Yeah, I'm curious. Where'd the name Discord come from?
So that's actually kind of stolen from Discordianism, which is kind of like a joke religion.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
There you go.
Enough said. Okay.
They're
Was there ever an
religious,
alternate name at all, or was that just
Yeah,
that's what it
we
is?
started out, like when we first started making stuff, like this was like way before we actually released anything, we were unemployed software, and that was because I was unemployed at the time, like I
Okay.
couldn't get a
Nice.
job anywhere, so I was like, unemployed software, there we go. But yeah, I don't know, Discordian.
Yeah, I liked that one.
Yeah.
I think it just has a ring to it. You know, it really doesn't have any meaning behind it towards us.
Yeah.
But it's
We had a
just one
great
of
logo
those-
too.
I mean,
It was like a dude in a trash can with like a trash can lid hat.
hilarious.
Awesome.
But Discordianism is something Jimmy, our musician, had introduced me to back in college, and you know, it's just kind of like its own irreverent joke type thing, and kind of absurdist philosophy. You know, like it's got like a lot of great philosophical points, but like just like how they present it is hilarious. So I just like the way that it kind of subverses things, and I've always felt that we don't really go by, you know, what the mainstream thinks is right. So it seemed like a good fit, you know.
And
Nice.
on
Okay.
that token, going against mainstream, what does the term indie mean to you guys, and is that something that resonates with you?
Yeah,
Tip.
define it for us, because we
Yeah.
argued over it just constantly.
Well, I
Exactly.
think it does. I mean, I think the meaning behind it is that, you know, I mean, basically what it is, it's you're independent. You don't have to answer to anybody. So you don't have like,
A publisher.
yeah, you don't have somebody dictating what the game should be. You know what I mean? Like when you develop a game, you don't have some analyst come over who has nothing, you know, doesn't know anything about games, but he looks at a chart and says, well, first-person shooters are big right now.
Unicorns
You know,
are
that's
ranking
what-
real high on the 12 to 14
So your
category
game
right
should
now.
be like
Overhead
that.
zombies, that's where it's
There
at.
it is, yeah.
I mean,
No, I
so you
totally
get,
agree. It's definitely changed. It's kind of like an evolving term because like when it originally was kind of formed, it meant independent of a publisher, you know, and since then, like all these indie games even came out on Xbox, which means, you know, if you came out on Xbox 360, it kind of means by definition you weren't independent since you had to have a publisher to come out on
Sure.
XBLA.
Mhm.
So, you know, like the term has always been kind of nebulous. I think like really it just comes down to the fact that it's smaller teams making games like, you know, that they want to make and not, like Tim said,
not
up to
the
publisher.
mainstream. It's not
Like
like,
I've never wanted to be like indie though, like label wise. Like in my mind, like I've always looked at like games that were made in like the 80s, early 90s. Like they were small teams just like us. Like that's like what I always pictured was
Sure.
starting a small company, not, you know, trying to drink out of mason jars and not bathe and
yeah.
whatever.
I
hipster
think you
stuff,
missed something right up here.
Yeah. Well, since we are talking about your games, why don't we get into Chasm? Can you guys give a brief synopsis of what that game is for our listeners who haven't heard of it yet? I don't know how Demarc's been on it, but
Well, our general pitch is that it's a procedurally generated RPG platformer, and you play as a young soldier named Dalton, and he's sent to this remote mining town to figure out like why all the miners in the town have disappeared. And when he gets there, he realizes that he's trapped in the town now, and basically has no other option than to delve down into the mines and figure out what's going on. So we took a lot of influences from the classic like Metroid genre games, Castlevania, Super Metroid, but also like a lot of games I grew up with that I really liked, like Mega Man and Zelda and you know, Bubble Bobble. I don't know.
It's definitely a meld of a lot of classics, but, you know.
And I know, James, you've been talking a lot about Dark Souls on the forums lately.
Yeah, we've been trying to like update it a bit, you know, and you know, I was like playing Tomb Raider and Dark Souls and a lot of these games, like newer games recently, and it's always kind of like walking that balance line because you want it to have that retro feel, but at the same time, it's like you want it to be updated and relevant and bring new things to the table. And we had just been like looking at like a lot of older games for inspiration. So like, you know, it was a conscious decision to kind of bring the game up to modern times, so to speak, without changing it too much, you know. So we've definitely incorporated some design philosophies from like newer stuff, and we're trying to tie in things like you wouldn't have necessarily seen. Like if this game was on Super Nintendo, you wouldn't be expecting to have like journal entries and stuff that you unlock like newer games. Like just the small stuff like that. Even I think is a big difference. Like as far as like storytelling and the way that mechanical hooks are set up, for the player.
There's a lot of recent games that have been coming out that have also been kind of side-scroller roguelikes, most notably Rogue Legacy, and not quite a roguelike, but Shovel Knight. I don't know if either of you guys chance play those. Has that given you guys any ideas? Have you tried them at all? And is there any...
I think we've both played Rogue Legacy, but I don't think one of us has played Shovel Knight yet. You haven't played it, have you?
You should.
I haven't. I want to.
It's so good.
Yeah, it looked awesome. I watched some playthrough of it. It looked great.
But have you guys seen anything in that you think maybe you can adapt for yours? Like, oh, that's a great idea. Especially Rogue Legacy seems similar to how you guys are doing procedural generated content.
Yeah.
With Rogue Legacy, like, we both really hate the grinding aspect of that game.
Yeah.
And that's something like we were both like, okay, that's something like we don't want to do. Like I think really more than anything, I'm sure Tim can attest, like, usually, like, when you look at games, you're like, okay, these are the things we don't want to do, rather than these are the things we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, it's always the things that we
Rogue
hate
Legacy...
that stick with us the most.
Yep. But we also look at the positive sides of things. I mean, both Rogue Legacy, I can't think of... like, like how they build the dungeons and a lot of technical things. But we also look at the negatives. So... we're very critical on games. I mean, even games that we really like, we're like, oh, let's not add that. Even though they do this, let's not do that because that's annoying,
Yeah, well, even like Dark Souls you just mentioned, like, there's things in that game we don't want to do. Like, I don't think either one of us would consider, like, not letting the world pause if you, like, go up to the start or something like that. Like,
right. God.
Oh, God.
There's just... you draw the line somewhere, like...
Yeah.
So I read a very in-depth kind of behind the scenes how Spelunky does its procedural generation and map design. Can you go a bit into depth as to how you're doing what you guys are doing and how that kind of makes your game unique?
Yeah, we're definitely going more for handcrafted content rather than like actually procedurally generating the content itself. So basically, like, I'll design like a room. Well, I design all the rooms from scratch, right? And then they're kind of like in concrete, so to speak. But the procedural part comes into how it's all connected into the area.
So the map itself is procedurally generated?
It's more like, okay, what room is going to be the next one over? Like when I change screens, like that's the part that you're not really going to know. So basically, like, I think for the mines area, the first area of the game, we've got like somewhere around 70 or 80 possible rooms.
Wow.
And then each time you play it, you basically get like 50 of those or something. So, it basically like looks at this big repository, generates it out into like a structure, and then the enemies in the treasure are also procedurally generated, like where they're at, and like, so even if you come into the same room, like it might have a different set of enemies in it, kind of thing. But we really kind of lean more towards, like, at first we were kind of going for, we'll just try to spawn anything we can fit anywhere, as long as it fits there. But we kind of realized along the way that that's not really the best. Like, we're really going for like a high quality experience, Like, we really want something polished that could even stand up to like Castlevania, and like kind of realize, like, after you like really analyze the stuff, like, oh, okay, they knew when you're approaching this room, if they place this enemy right here, it's going to be interesting because he has this behavior, and you have these obstacles in front of you. If you just start like throwing shit into the rooms, like, you kind of lose that like
pacing.
Yeah, the pacing, and just kind of like the having it more to the gameplay than just oh, well, he fit there, that's what you're fighting there, like, kind of thing.
Yeah. You
can kind of set up the situations a little bit better. Like, for instance, we got like an enemy that throws rocks, right? I mean, like, yeah, you can just throw him anywhere, but he works really well, like, in, like, little nooks, like, when you're, like, climbing up tall rooms and things like that. So we try to, like, we've started trying to, like, make enemies that fit the situations better than just making a bunch of stuff and trying to jam it everywhere. Which is kind of double-sided because, like, we're trying to make the game as replayable as possible, but at the same time, like, there's, like, always this fine line where if you go too far, like, trying to push it, it just becomes less fun. You might have more variation, but I don't feel like you're going to have as good of an experience, like, overall,
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. And I think we kind of went the same approach as Rogue Legacy. I think that's exactly what they did. Is they use template rooms and then they randomly place traps or randomly place enemies around in the room. So then you'll have situations where, like, you might jump onto a platform and it's impossible not to get hit. And that's kind of the things we wanted to avoid. Like, you know, like say there's a rat on a little ledge and you have to jump up to the ledge and there's no way you don't get hit by the rat. We didn't want things like that, you know, because it's pretty annoying.
Yeah, there's a ton of things like in the original prototype that just like drove us crazy, like
archetypal annoying bats.
God, like yeah, the bats. Starting the game with a knife.
The
and,
mini
like,
boss
having,
bats.
Like, bats.
Yeah, the mini boss bats.
So many bad decisions. Like it's hard though because you don't like see all the mistakes you make at once. You know, like
Yeah.
And like the hard part too is like people give you feedback, but it's not necessarily like they kind of see the problem, but not really. You know, so like okay, if it's a problem that you have to crouch, like you're constantly crouching and like kneeling and stabbing rats with a knife, their solution might be, oh, you should start the player with a sword, not that. Maybe you shouldn't have like tiny rats everywhere, you know, like
Yeah, right.
so like a lot of time like we'll fix a problem in the wrong way and then like kind of have to go back and be like, okay, wait, we just created like more problems. It's always like with the software, it's always cascading problems, you know. It's like it's not just one thing. Like you fix that and then it's like all this other stuff. So we've learned it's very important to like really figure out like, okay, what's the real issue here? You know, is it that the player needs to start with a sword, or is it that the enemies need to change, or you know, this or that? Like, you kind of have to like really take a step back and look at problems, I guess, from a higher level. And the only other thing I'd say about the Rogue Legacy thing is the other thing we really wanted to avoid that we didn't like about that game was that the placement was like totally random. So like the first room you walk into, like in the area, might be insane where there's just like projectiles flying like everywhere. Like
that's half my game, yeah.
yeah. So we like really wanted to avoid that and kind of make it so it gets progressively harder like as you go. So we kind of have like the sub area concept now, where there's like mini dungeons. So like the mines is made of like 5 of these mini dungeons, and then we can kind of pace it and say, okay, in the first mini dungeon, like you don't get any rooms that are labeled with like a hard tag or, you know, different difficulties. So that way we can kind of at least guarantee that they're not going to have stuff that's like crazy thrown at them right away.
Death trap room or something.
Yeah.
They walk into.
You save that for the end, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's been like the design experience with Chasm is like walking all these lines of like trying to find the right amount of procedural generation and the right amount of hand-designed high-quality content and, you know, balancing the difficulty and the pacing and everything else. It's just... And we haven't had a lot to look at, you know? Like, I'd say Rogue Legacy is probably the closest thing to what we're doing, and I think Chasm is a lot different.
And speaking of Spelunky, we loved Spelunky. I don't even think there's one negative thing we could say about Spelunky, but it's got a whole different kind of... Like, we looked at Spelunky in a lot of aspects of our game, but... Spelunky is a lot different than our game, like in a lot of ways. So
it's
there's
a beast
lot
of
of
its
things
own,
we
definitely.
couldn't really. Yeah, because it's something you can pick up and just play over and over and over. It's more arcade, you know.
Like we talked about doing like the roguelike procedural or you know, permadeath and like all that kind of stuff. Where okay, you start a game of Chasm, you make it 3 rooms in, you die, like you start over, just like Spelunky. But you know that when you start like analyzing some of these things that sound great. Then you're kind of like, well, you can't like really do any kind of character building, you know. Like we'd have to take out like all the equipment and like all the kind of stuff that like really makes the game feel like it's part of like that kind of old school Castlevania genre, you know, RPG. A
lot of story would likely have to go by the wayside.
Yeah. It's exactly. Like you scrap all these things, and I think we had kind of built up in our mind what we wanted the game to be, and then like. When you try to like mesh all these design philosophies, you find out pretty quickly. Like,
well, we knew we wanted a Metroidvania-style game, and you know, you can't really have arcade elements like that, and unless you're in like hardcore mode or something like that. But in normal
so we're kind of doing
mode,
that with the hardcore mode. Yeah.
So what made you decide on the Metroidvania style?
Well, it's just kind of like what we wanted to do, I guess.
You've mentioned even Take Arms started that way, correct? as a similar sort of Metroidvania.
Yeah.
And then...
Take Arms started as Metroidvania 2. If you watch that Evolution of Take Arms video we did, there's some actual footage of... We had like an Alucard sprite in there and everything. Like,
oh, nice.
we've been trying to make like a real Metroidvania for a while. And that's the reason why we didn't with Take Arms was because we knew we weren't anywhere near ready.
Mm-hmm.
we knew like we weren't even anywhere near content-wise like had a grasp. So that's why that game like went multiplayer and why it did what it did. And, you know, I think we learned a ton from it, and I don't know, like, Chasm's been tough because it's been like we spent a lot of time like trying to figure out what is Chasm, you know, like just because like we put out the prototype at the Kickstarter, like I think if we would have made that game and just like left it like that and added a few more areas onto it, like yeah, some people would have liked it, but it never would have been like what we want. Like we really want to make like a classic game. I think that's what Tim wants too. I don't know. Like we never.
That's
really
what we want to play,
this,
really, and that's why we want to play. You know, when's the last Metroidvania came out that isn't like Castlevania or like where they reuse all the same stuff? You know,
like we were both flipping out when Shadow Complex came out. Like
yeah, we loved
like,
that.
Oh my God, there's finally a game like this.
There's something. Yeah.
And we actually looked at that game a lot when we were making Take Arms, like to work on like the aiming and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, we did.
So I mean, like we've been, you know, like kind of looking at this stuff forever. But yeah, I don't know. Like there was definitely a crossroads about 8 months ago or 9 months, probably around the beginning of the year, where we were kind of like, okay, wait, should we just, you know, kind of make this more like Spelunky and just say screw it? Because we were just getting so frustrated with trying to figure out like how to lay out the world and achieve like what we were talking about with like the pacing and like all those kind of things. Like because everything we were doing at the time like just was not working. Like we were trying to make like these giant, you know, areas that were more like Super Metroid, that were like all interconnected and like one big singular mass, and
it's like a maze. It's like you get lost.
It was terrible, like because we knew we needed to put stuff in there to keep it interesting. Like you can't just have like 100 random rooms all connected together.
You get very fatigued. Like you think that like up front that's something that you want is like a maze-like experience where you have all these choices. But really, when you're playing it and you have like each room you go into has like 3 doors you can go through, it gets really crazy. You know, you're like, okay, well, there's too many doors. Like,
so you have like a million branching paths, and then like there's not like really big rewards at the end, like just like lots of dead ends and stuff. And, like we really wanted to avoid the other thing that was driving me crazy personally. I think Tim didn't like it either. Was in the original prototype we. Like a lot of these decisions were just made hastily because I was trying to get this shit done for GDC to show it off. But I decided like, I was like, oh, you know, Diablo, there's like weapons and stuff flying at you every second. That's fun. So like we had like every treasure chest like popping out 3 different items, and like you just have like 100 items in your inventory. Like we both hated that. Like eventually we're just like, we got to change this. You know, like
yeah.
You can't be constantly just picking up like Iron Sword +1 like over and over and over. Like. It just didn't work for the style of game that we wanted to make. So, you know, it was just like, okay, how do you keep the player rewarded? How do you pace their experience? How do you, like, make sure the stuff's different all the time? How do you, like, make sure the enemies are always in good places? Like, how do you keep the dungeons, like, in a fashion where they're interesting to explore? You don't get overwhelmed. Like, there's just, like, a million questions, you know, we had to tackle. And I think we're both feeling pretty confident now that I think, like, we did it. Like...
Yeah, it's way better now.
It even seems weird to say, but I think we did it. Like where we actually have a procedurally generated Metroidvania that like feels like it could have like been on your console 20 years ago. You know,
achievement unlocked.
Part, I mean, yeah, for sure.
So
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was gonna say real quick. I mean, there was a lot of time. I mean, the biggest problem we've had was the procedural generation. I mean, a lot of the times we were like, hey, should we just, you know, make a really good Metroidvania and remove the, you know. But we're like, we can't because that's what we put, you know.
Like, yeah, like we were like locked in, like that.
We're locked in, like so we got to make it good.
We have to, because at several points, like the game was like really deviating from, like what we had originally designed, and that was kind of like when we were looking at Spelunky too. We were kind of thinking, okay. Like, it would be way easier if we just make this, like, a handmade experience and say, screw the procedural generation, or go the other way and let the procedural generation just pop out whatever, and, you know, people won't really be expecting, like, a big, deep, paced experience, you know? But luckily, I think we just kept pushing at it, you know, and it's kind of weird, because it felt like the game, like, somehow like went way off path and then just like came back around somehow. And, like it's now like
Magic.
very much like the original prototype, but just like 10 times better. You know, like there's like really no comparison.
So was there
to
ever
go
a
back.
moment, because when you came out with a Kickstarter, you say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Was there ever a moment during development that you said, oh crap, maybe our backers aren't going to like what we've made because it's deviated so much?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Sure.
for sure. Like when we scrapped like the floor concept for like how the areas were laid out, and we scrapped like the Diablo items flying at you every 2 seconds. When we added the Dark Souls inspired experience system and the campfires, there's been like a lot of changes that, I mean, basically like we always have them in mind. Like everything we change, we're like, okay, is this like anywhere near what we promised people? Because it's good for ourselves too,
there.
because we don't want to get too far off track. You know, like we know
Yeah.
from experience making games, like we could just change this thing completely and make something else. If we just started
Like
walking
every
down
day.
some other path, like that's just how game
Sure.
development is.
Like you had a nugget of a different game you've been thinking about for years, and it just kind of evolved into that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it has to do with getting bored with stuff, you know, like
Exactly. That's like the biggest thing. You'll look at the, we've been looking at, he's been looking at this game for 2 years, the mines and all that. You start to say, well, is this even fun? Like, is this a fun game? Because you've played it over and over and over, it starts, like you don't see all the fun elements. But when you come in from the outside and you play it, you watch people and they're like, they loving it, So
yeah, like I streamed the other night, people were just like, this one guy was like, I'll never forget this. He's like, I haven't been as excited for this game, because I was like playing it, like live streaming it. I haven't been excited for a game like as much as this since 1994 with Secret of Mana.
Nice.
I was just like,
nice.
dude, damn, like 20 years?
like, really?
That's a compliment right there.
We have arrived. You're welcome.
Yeah, so it made me feel good, because like that was like one of the first like we do like community live streams for like our backers to check out what we're doing. But the other night, like I was testing out that hitbox streaming, and I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna play the first area of the game. It's like about an hour, and just let anybody watch it. And so that was the first time people have like really seen what the game is now, and it was just really good to hear all this like great feedback after playing through it, because like Tim said, like we've totally lost perspective on if it's fun anymore, like basically at this point we're just like, okay, if something sucks we'll change it. But I think about everything else is just I guess I was kind of scared, like if we were just numb to it and had just kind of accepted what's there, or if it's really good, because it's kind of like you're like carving something and you're getting rid of all the junk like around it constantly. Like you're always seeing like all these little problems, and then at some point like you don't have any more little problems to pick at, and then you're kind of like, okay, I guess that's good. Like you don't, because you've been looking at it for so long, like you don't know anymore, but that there's none of those little problems. Like there's nothing else you can really fix unless you like completely change things. So
speaking of which, how has the community helped develop Chasm?
So far, like, I mean, we post stuff and we get a lot of feedback, but I'd say so far it really hasn't been a whole ton of community involvement. That's really going to be coming up here when we launch the early access. And we kind of did that on purpose because, it's been tough enough for us to figure out what Chasm has been along the way. And that's why we've held off so long on putting out like builds for people to play and stuff, is because we never wanted to push something out there and then like have people seriously look at it and give us feedback and knowing like we're not really happy with it anyway, Like it's kind of like you want to get, it's kind of like asking somebody, I guess, to critique a house that you're going to be tearing down anyway. It's like you want them to critique like whatever it is that you're happy with, before you bring in an outside perspective. And after just telling you all the problems we've had, you can see like we weren't happy with it for like a long time, and so we've always been like just trying to like wait and get to that point like where we knew feedback would be useful, and we're finally there now. So like we're ready to be like, okay, this is what the game is. Give us all your feedback. But at the same time, we've been posting devlogs and stuff on the forums, and we have gotten feedback in a number of specific cases. Like I'll post up screenshots, and people will say like, "Oh, well, this would be better, or this would be better," and we have no problem making changes. It's really just always been like, okay, is this worth people critiquing?
Right. Something we haven't talked about yet, but you guys have a very striking visual style, and your music is fantastic. What inspired both those elements? Why'd you guys choose the style that you've gone with?
Well, I really wanted to do a pixel game from the beginning. Like that's like before Chasm was even Chasm. Like I was working on a whole other game, and I was like, this is going to be a pixel game. Like I wanted something that like reminded me of you know, the games I grew up with that I still think are beautiful. Like if you look back at like Zelda: A Link to the Past, like I think that game just like nailed the aesthetics so hard that it looks beautiful to this day. Like it hasn't aged at all in my mind. Like a lot of games I'll look back at and be like, yeah, that looks pretty crappy now, but like that game is like so clean graphically, and it's just like every pixel is perfect in that game, and that's something like I really wanted to go after. And I mean, really though, like the style all ended up in Tony's hands. Like that was basically all him. Like I gave him the resolution format and like worked with him on like the character size and stuff, and then we just went back and forth with drafts until we found something close.
Okay, and how about the music?
And that's basically all been well, it has all been Jimmy Stevelak, and you know, he's been looking at like a lot of sources to go off of, and that was definitely, if he was here, he'd tell you the hell he's been through, like trying to figure out like what Chasm sounds like, you know, like what the world's like. Because I think the most obvious thing was to like look at like Castlevania and those kind of games, but our areas are like much bigger, and like we wanted to like go for something more atmospheric. So you know, he was like looking at Super Metroid and you know, like a lot of these other games that like kind of went a little more organic with the soundtrack and, you know, a little bit more atmospheric. So he struggled a lot trying to find like the balance, you know, between like the atmosphere and like the melody and all that. So I mean, we're like super happy with what he's come up with. I think it's pretty amazing, and he pretty much nailed the style. It's kind of funny too, because like the Kickstarter trailer we did to promote the Kickstarter, he did like a spaghetti western style song for that, and like that was the first piece. Like we had considered like Chasm kind of being western-y, but that was like the song, like we were just like, yeah, okay, let's try it, and people just loved it. So you know, then he kind of felt like he had to do something like that for the game and kind of bring those influences into it. So he kind of pulled like a lot of the synthesizers and stuff out of the original tracks and kind of just went at it from scratch, you know, just trying to like nail that atmosphere first and still kind of make it funky and, you know, upbeat. So it's definitely been a tough road for him to kind of nail all that, but I think he did for sure.
Absolutely. That's great.
I would agree. Yeah. You got another one, Demarc?
Yeah, so James, you're the self-proclaimed producer. Tim, you're kind of behind programming, but I'm curious, what kind of different hats do you guys, or have you guys worn during this whole procedure?
Tim's been like the engine and tool master for sure. That's you know, I gave him basically what I did. I was like, here, sorry.
Change all my code.
everything I had did or done for the prototype, like, you know, it was like a lot of duct tape, you know, stuff. Like, it's kind of crazy if you go back and look at the prototype, right, Tim? Like, the fact that like it all worked and it was just, there was nothing there. Like, there's no scripting engine. Like, there was nothing. Like, it was like the bare minimum to like pretty much look like a game.
Like the editor was an editor from 3 different games, so I'd like click something and it would just blow up. Like, what's this objects button do? And
I was proud of that thing, damn it.
Game.
So it's,
yeah, actually, the editor I used for the Chasm prototype was the editor from 36 Chambers that had become the editor for Take Arms.
Yeah,
that didn't become the editor
we
for...
just went from scratch. It was like, all right, we're just starting from scratch here.
Yeah. So that was another thing that kind of added to the development time, I think, early on, was like basically kind of taking a step back and being like, all right, what do we really need for the final game? And, you know, Tim's going to make it so we can actually produce content quickly. Because we had learned with Take Arms, like, I think that was a big lesson we learned with that game, was you need to be able to make content quickly, or else you're just gonna, you know, fall into the trap where you're kind of always like stuck, you know, and not able to kind of kick things out how you need to. Because like with that game, like we wanted to do like what, 6 maps at least, Tim, and by the time we had done like 3, we were just like, oh my god, like this is taking so much time, like let's just push it out, like because we had spent 2 years on that game, like. It's kind of crazy, but anyway, sorry. So yeah, Tim's basically been the code guru, and I mean I still code every once in a while. Like I'll get my hands dirty with some AI stuff, or if I start rooting around in menus and things like that. But I've been mostly focused on like level design and enemy behaviors, and then kind of like keeping everything else running at the same time, making sure everybody's like working on stuff and
social media,
The face.
business.
management. Yeah, he's been wearing a lot of hats.
Like whenever an event would end and I could actually get back to the game, I'd be like, oh, like this is actually what I do. Now I remember, like I don't just prep for a month for PAX or like whatever thing is coming up.
Speaking of which, it is coming up.
I'm not going.
Not coming over here to PAX Prime.
Couldn't pay me to go right now.
Okay.
Like,
East was enough then.
PAX East was a big learning experience for sure. I think if we did another show, like it'd be a lot faster because we were basically going from scratch, like having to produce all the assets for all the artwork and the banners and the just
Plus,
like
we had no idea where we were going. I mean, we went onto the floor and we're just like, okay, where's our booth? Like, everybody's like setting up everything. We're like walking around like morons. Like, where do we go? Where's our booth?
And they just said, you go over there. Did they just point you somewhere? Or?
Yeah, basically.
Well, all I will say is Sony is awesome. So Chasm will actually be at PAX Prime. I just won't be.
Awesome.
Should be able to actually play like the latest version of the game in the Sony PS4 area. Well, like the latest demo, I guess I should say.
That's great. So I hear obviously you're going PS4. Any other platforms being hinted at?
I mean, we've been looking into Vita. We really want to do like the crossplay and all that stuff, but it's the framework we use, Monogame, has like been held up in licensing restrictions forever. Well, actually, it's not Monogame. It's the Mono VM runtime behind it. But basically, like there's been a roadblock that we can't get around. So like we've just been kind of waiting.
Okay.
We keep hearing like, oh, it's gonna hopefully next month. Like, this is all gonna be worked out. But it's just it's been like 4 or 5 months now, so I'm just not holding my breath anymore.
So it's a want, but a maybe eventuality at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to.
Cool.
It's if the Monogame framework comes out, like we don't have to rewrite the entire game like we'd have to for Nintendo platforms at this point. So it's definitely a much lower hanging fruit, I guess, than if we wanted to go to 3DS or something like that. We'd actually have to do like a full C++ rewrite for that,
Right.
So I mean, like we definitely love Nintendo platforms. That's what I grew up on, was NES and Super Nintendo before I switched over to PlayStation. But yeah, it's just getting the game to it. And as a small team, like I mean, we've had some offers and stuff, but like, it's just we've always taken the perspective that we don't want to bite off more than we can chew, and we want to keep things high quality and consistent, and we want to be involved. And like having that level of control, like kind of prohibits you from doing a lot of stuff. But I'd much rather not have my game on a platform than have it be there and be crap.
Yep.
So. That's always been something that we've looked at, and I mean, we've gone back and forth about it several times. What we should be doing for launch. It's like, should we just do PC first and then, do like Rogue Legacy or one of these games and like launch on all consoles later? Like, how exactly do you do it? And it's, like we're constantly thinking about it because like you read articles and it's like, oh, if you don't launch your game on like every platform at once, it's going to do like crap if you try to launch it there later, kind of thing. But
and then you look at things like Rogue Legacy and Minecraft that have all released later, and
they're doing
yeah,
exactly.
and they work, and it's always kind of like, okay, well, I guess if Chasm's huge, it won't have any problems, but that's not really something you can kind of bank on.
Well, speaking of huge, I hear that you're going to be in 12,000 retail kiosk stores.
Possibly.
Okay.
We're trying to get the demo approved right now.
Okay.
So
but if that's approved,
this is the first time we've had to deal with going through all the testing and checks and like all that kind of stuff. So
I mean, that's huge.
Hopefully,
that's
if it gets through,
amazing.
That is huge.
Yeah, hopefully if it gets through, we will be on the fall refresh, they call it. So like every PS4 kiosk that's at like a GameStop, Best Buy, Target.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Well, I'll have Chasm sitting on it waiting to be played.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're actually working on that today. We just finished up we got the box art done and rewrote the game description, got all the screenshots together. So we just got to get the demo submitted for testing, and hopefully all that works out. It's kind of, I don't even like, it's kind of weird. Like when I think about it, like I don't even like really get excited over it. I guess it's just so crazy of a concept to me that it like hasn't really hit.
Dream.
Yeah, it's like so weird. I don't
Is
know.
it really on the console? Are they really gonna put it on the console?
I basically just.
I'm gonna go look for a console and see.
I think Tim and I are both realists, though. Like, we kind of always take the negative perspective. Like, yeah, it's probably going to fail.
Well, coming from somebody who used to work at GameStop and Josh has worked at a similar retail store, those kiosks do a lot for promotion. And if
yeah, I saw they sent us like a
That's
spreadsheet
good.
that had all the numbers. Like, all those kiosks actually keep track of like everything people do on them. I don't know if you knew that, but they know like all these numbers. And I saw this big ass spreadsheet, and I was just like,
Well, I know you guys have been working hard on it. You're about to release the alpha build for Kickstarter. Is that where you guys are at this point?
yeah, we're shooting like super hard right now to get this early. We're calling it the private early, either private early access or early access. I don't know. I've been going back and forth between both, but basically we want to get. We're trying to get everything set up on Steam so we can kind of generate codes. It's not going to be on the Steam storefront, so it'll be just the people that backed via Kickstarter and pre-ordered through our website or the Humble widget. So they're going to get first dibs on the first two areas of the game. And that's going to kind of be our soft launch, so we can get people kind of playing it, see what the problems are with system, people's machines, and get like an initial round of feedback from people. And then our plan is probably around November to launch on Steam with the first three areas, plus all the feedback we've got from before incorporated.
So that would be early access.
Awesome.
At that point?
Yeah, that would be actual early access on Steam, like a public launch.
Okay.
So that's kind of like our major goal right now is to hit that, and then our kind of immediate goal is to get this early access out as soon as humanly possible. Like we're hoping within a couple weeks, actually. So our list is like shrunk way down.
Awesome.
We're getting down there. So
and dare I pose the question that all developers hate? Any tentative release of the full thing?
We really have no clue.
Okay.
I mean, like we've tried making dates a couple times and it just keeps failing. So we're just super focused on the early access right now. I mean, honestly, like if everything works out, and say we launch the first three areas in November, probably the best we could do, working as hard as we can, is to get the other three areas out one a month. Like the plan is to just continually roll stuff out. So that would push us up to like December, January, February. So I'd say, yeah, probably February is where we're at now.
But it's done when it's done.
So, yeah, it's kind of done when it's done, I mean, honestly, we could have pushed this out probably this year if we wanted to, like mid-year, or probably even hit our original prospective date of May if we didn't take the time to like really be like, this sucks, we can't make a whole game like this. Several times, like we've just continually not been happy with things. And it's kind of like, if you put all this work into it, you don't want to settle, So I don't feel like we're settling. Do you, Tim? Have we settled?
No, I don't think we have. I think we've gone beyond like the other side of settling.
Yeah, we're way beyond settling. But, like we both know, like if this game isn't amazing, like all of our work was in vain. Like all of this effort, like all of it is just not for what we wanted, So it's kind of like we have to hit where we wanted, the mark that we were trying to hit, quality-wise.
For sure.
All right. Well, honestly, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, maybe not Demarc. He can speak for himself on this, but everything you guys have been talking about has been fantastic. To say that you have a vision that you're looking at and you guys are continuing to go towards that vision. I hate to ask this too. I know you're deep in the weeds. Any other games you guys are thinking about at this point as far as what's going to happen after, or is your life Chasm?
Yeah, no, we talk about it every once in a while just to like kind of get our minds off of the game and get some creative juices flowing,
Mm-hmm.
The thing with making a big game like Chasm is at some point like the creativity part kind of starts to drop off, and you're just kind of into the grind of it. Right. So yeah, we talk about like what we're going to do next every once in a while just to kind of get the creative juices flowing. I think we have made a couple firm decisions. One is, what were we saying to him is, one, we're going to design it around not having any saving.
Yeah, so more arcade.
Yeah, like we definitely want to do something arcadey.
Oh, nice.
We definitely want to reuse the same engine and tools that we've just spent all this time developing. So it's kind of forced us into like, we're probably going to do another platformer, but it's probably going to be more actual roguelike or something, or like arcade style. Okay. And we really want to do something sci-fi. So throw all those things together and
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
we'll see what we end up with. We're not trying to commit to anything yet, but
Sure.
I think I think we're both agreed though that we're not.
We've got it recorded. You're committed.
We're
I will
letting
just
the
guarantee
Kickstarters
people
know.
not to expect Chasm 2. Like,
Chasm in
like
Space
the-
DLC confirmed. Got it.
so yeah,
So-
we'll be very hesitant to do something as large as Chasm again, or just something. I think our other stipulation was no story, or like at least no story that you have to tell in the game. Like,
Okay.
just give it a
Yeah.
setup, and then that's
Should
it.
be very simple story, you know.
Nice palate cleanser.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just got to
okay.
be something small and fun, you know. Like that's kind of like what we need at this point. After we get all this out, because I mean, honestly, like I wouldn't be looking forward to doing another Chasm like right after this. Like,
Sure.
it's just been. I think we've had a lot of ideas for it. Don't get me wrong. Like, you know, we've talked a lot about what we could do
Yeah.
for a sequel.
And I'm sure we're gonna do a massive game again. It's just the next game, you know. It's gonna be something
We have to
highly
get enough
polished,
time.
something highly polished, fun, but less worrying about story and things like that.
We basically need enough time to forget how shitty it gets.
Yeah.
On something for 2 years, like.
So I'm sure it depends on obviously the success of how Chasm becomes, but once release comes, do you envision yourselves taking a break for a while, or I mean, what's next really?
Well, hey, like I said, we're pessimists in all this. Like we're doing, in everything we do our best effort, but we always expect like basically the worst case. So I mean, like, you know, worst case if Chasm fails, like we'll probably be done making games. Like, you know, like we're both older in life now, I think, and you know, have other people to worry about other than ourselves. So it's kind of like, you know, if this doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, this was the one shot. So, you know, if Chasm doesn't make enough to sustain us as a company and make something else, then I think we'll throw in the towel and just be really happy that we accomplished something huge. You know, like
Sure.
way bigger than anything I've ever attempted in my life. I know that.
Yep.
So who is the Bruce
But,
Wayne
yeah.
to James's Batman?
But if it does well, then yeah, we'll probably do. I mean, we love like games that add on extra content and like do some updates. So we'll probably do support for a while. Do some.
Sure, and like I made a thing as like all the games that I've bought on Steam that I haven't finished is after we complete this and it's a success, I'm gonna beat every game that I haven't finished on Steam. I have like over 100 titles on Steam.
So that's like a year right
Exactly.
there. Like,
God, a buddy of mine
I
has
promised my
something like
wife.
900 plus Steam games alone, not including the other games that he has. He has a problem.
Yeah, it's those
That's weird.
sales.
I
you
know.
Like, those sales. You're like $5 and you'll buy it and you never even install it. You're like,
or you
Wait
play
a
it for like
minute.
2
Uh-huh.
minutes. You're like, all
so
right.
I don't even look at the
That's
sales anymore. I mean, at this point, like.
This last summer sale, it's like sending him links every day. I was like, dude, it's only $1.99. He's like, quit sending me shit. I'm serious. Quit sending me shit.
What
Yeah.
gets me are those stupid packs where it's like, oh, well, I can buy 10 games. I don't even know what 8 of them are, but
Yeah, right.
$4. Or humble bundles. Those are the worst.
Yeah.
I love me
Yeah.
some humbles,
Yeah,
but
it's-
oh god.
Well, that stuff's kind of scary from a developer perspective. Like, a lot of games have been so devalued, you know, like, I don't even want to think about putting Chasm on sale at this point. You know what I mean? Like, as part of a humble bundle or something like that, where it's basically like you're selling it for $1. Like, it's-
iOS port incoming.
yeah, I mean
99
that's
cents.
like the one negative thing out of like all this indie scene that's been happening over the last few years is like I really feel like while Humble's been great and it gets a lot of eyes on stuff, at the same time, like I think it's been a major proponent of like convincing people that, oh, you don't need to buy this game for $15 when it launches. Just wait till it's $1. Like,
Yeah.
Same with the
I guess
Steam
one-
sales for that matter.
yeah,
Yep. And that's the one thing I worry about, like in the 80s, that'll happen again. To where in the 80s,
you know, everybody was making a game and it was like garbage game. You know, like a movie would come out, like, you know, Predator or whatever. They make a Predator game and it was like the worst game ever. Yeah, exactly.
Or the games that were coming in cereal boxes.
Yeah, hey, I liked Chex Quest, dude.
Chex Quest.
Those Tiger games. I don't know if you ever played those, but they were like horrible.
I had Castlevania too.
The
Tiger version.
The cheap Game & Watch ass
painting
games
on the background with dots. Yeah.
Okay, I liked my Power Ranger watch, so let's.
I had a Tetris watch. I love that thing.
But as if there isn't enough to worry about just making a good game, you also have to worry about the marketing, like the market, the actual market, the state of it. Like when it finally comes out, we're like, are indie games even going to exist by the time we finish Chasm? Like,
yeah, will be relevant. You know, will people be over pixel
like, another pixel game? God.
Yeah. It's kind of like our zombie game that we started. Remember we said we were. And then all these zombie games came out.
And then the I made a game with zombies and it came out, and I was just like,
"Oh, we can't do that."
Hate you.
Well, guys, let's wrap it up. I have one final question for you. If anyone is interested in you guys or Chasm, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to do so?
So our main company page is discordgames.com. It's DISCORD games.com. We also have the main Chasm page, which is chasmgame.com. And then we've got, you know, all the social media stuff set up. We're at Discord Games on Twitter, /Discord Games on Facebook. And of course, you can pre-order the game now through Humble at the chasmgame.com website.
Can you tell real quick the different kinds of stuff that they get with the tiers?
Yeah, so we wanted to like kind of give people a bonus no matter what tier they order. So if you get the game will be $15 on launch. So if you pre-order for the $15 one, you actually get a PDF instruction manual. We're gonna have it like all old school, like you would have expected to have gotten with like a Zelda game or something back in the day.
So I get notes in the back.
Yep, packed with like kind of all kinds of cool like little doodles and artwork and tips and tricks. And then we've got a couple pieces of music on there. There's the Chasm EP soundtrack that comes with that. That's like a 6-track soundtrack basically from the original prototype and some newer music Jimmy had done. And then it also comes with the Discord discography that had music from like all the games that we've made that we never released, as well as 48 Chambers and Take Arms and some Chasm stuff on it. So that's all with the $15 tier. We have the silver tier at $25, and that has the early access that'll be coming up, as well as access to our developer forums, our live streams, and the full game soundtrack, the OST. And then we have a gold pre-order for $45 that has all that other stuff, plus you can get your name in the credits. The Chasm Compendium, which is it's going to be a PDF that's going to be the manual times 100. It's going to have like all the concept art from the game, like revisions of how everything progressed, development notes, tabletop gaming module if you're in a Dungeons and Dragons and all that stuff. So yeah, we've got that up there too. And then the last thing in that is a kind of remix and unused material soundtrack that's going to be kind of like a double disc thing. So
awesome.
We try to get a lot of good extras for people to you know, reward them for helping us out, and pretty happy with it. So
can you go real quick and say what your live stream schedule is like?
Well, we try to like do at least a few days a week. It's kind of tough because like we've tried to schedule it a lot, but it just kind of ends up being a little random. Like we each kind of have a day to stream, but it really depends on like if we have stuff like we can show people. Like we try not to do huge spoilers on streams and stuff.
Okay.
So, but we at least try to stream at least like 2 or 3 times a week at minimum for a few hours each time.
Awesome.
So.
All right. Well, perfect. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. Big thank you to James and Tim. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. And again, I know it's super late for you guys, so we definitely appreciate
thank you guys very, very
Thanks
much.
A lot
it means
for
a
having
lot.
us.
Yeah. And of course, if you guys want to get a hold of us, send us some emails, information, you can check everything at hardcorecasualgamer.com. Demarc's wearing the shirts. He's pimping us out here. So, all right, perfect. Well, that's it for Hardcore Casual Gamer. Have a good night, guys.
Take care.
Good night.
Take care.
Demarc, tell a joke or something while I make this work. Yeah. Entertain.
So, knock knock.
Oh God, I was kidding.
I want to hear it now. Shit better be good.
Yeah.
So, James, knock knock.
Who's there?
I eat mop.
I eat Mapu.
You can't giggle at your own joke. What are you...
Oh man, this shit.
It's the simple things in life.
Wait, you didn't tell a joke. That was it? I am Mapu.
That was the joke.
Oh God.
Start off on the lowest note possible. You can only go up from here. That's the good thing, you know.
Exactly.
Hey, I got it working. Woo.